Hi, welcome to Longhaus TV, the research channel. You're with Peter Carr and Scott Stewart, and recently, Peter, you attended the IBM conference in Vegas, IOD. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So Information on Demand is the name of the event, and it's one of the big 5 events that IBM do each year. So, you know, there was some conversation at the press conference that, you know, there was only 11,000 people at IOD compared to the 30-odd thousand that go to Open World. But what you need to remember, as Steve Mills pointed out, was that IBM actually do 5 of these events globally, and so they collectively get at least twice as many as the next largest vendor in terms of attendees at their event. So IOD within the portfolio deals with all their information management, their content management, their analytics, and their business intelligence product suite, which over the last couple of years has just continued to grow and grow and grow and grow. So it was a great event this year. Obviously, you know, some interesting trends driving the market in terms of big data, and you know, big data was the overarching theme. You know, whether or not, depending on which session you were in, we were talking about it from a content perspective or a data perspective or an analytical perspective. You know, it was a really great show.
And were there any sort of overarching themes that were repeated throughout? I mean, I'm assuming there was a lot of cloud, a lot of social mobility, and is that what, you know, was pretty prevalent throughout the whole event? Yeah,
so I guess the underlying thing that tied all those things together, because they're kind of trends, right? But how does that really hit the road? And all of those things you just mentioned really can be encompassed in this big data movement, and big data has so much to do with that information or content or data in motion. And so, you know, the overriding theme of the conference was how we can start to, you know, improve our intelligence inside organisations in terms of harnessing this stuff. So the conference talked a lot about what an organisation's analytical quotient was in terms of their maturity, and kind of gave some stages in terms of how to progress through that. So that was very interesting. From an analytics perspective, they kind of talked about this analytics value formula, which was a combination of the people and the amount of data that's currently being managed, and also the amount of analytics being used inside the organisation. And so the combination of those 3 things, you know, provided a bit of a litmus for organisations in terms of how they were going.
Okay, what do you think that the main question of people going to that, like the CIO, what's the main thing that they're seeking out when they go to something like that, particularly on information?
I think, you know, it's still a question of, you know, regardless of what these new big trends that are all encompassing and try to sideswipe us, a lot of it was very much about traditional data management. And, you know, what you know, we as ordinary organisations, and by ordinary organisations, I refer to the Commonwealth banks, the, you know, state communities department or health department, or the mining company, or even, you know, other small to medium-sized organisations. What's very prevalent when you get 11,000 people together in a room is that we've all still got the same problems, you know, and we're dealing with basic data management, basic data warehousing. You know, the flow of content within organisations, how information is or isn't correctly used to advantage inside organisations. And so I remember there being a very interesting comment that one of the keynote speakers made, and that was that data at rest or content at rest is a cost to an organisation, whereas data or content in motion equals an opportunity. And I think that's very much, you know, if you wanted to sum it up, what IBM was looking to get across in that week was how organisations could start to unlock some of that data at rest, to get it in motion, to understand what they've got, but then also to be able to throw a rope around this continual stream of big data that's coming in. And they, you know, they gave some, when they talk about big data, they really do mean big data. And they gave some, you know, wonderful examples about, you know, Google currently processes 24 petabytes of data a day. Twitter currently processes 7 petabytes of data a day. So, you know, at that level, the ability to harness that kind of information becomes really important.
So the interesting thing when you go to a lot of those events is they'll typically show a slide of, you know, an information architecture or a framework and show their capability and all the different boxes and the layers. But, you know, as a CIO and you look at your own diagram of your own enterprise ICT, and it doesn't look anywhere near as good as that, right? So, you know, what are they doing about helping the CIO get from A to B?
And this is where I think IBM is really starting to get it right. IOD as an event, as a product family, is now about 6 years old inside IBM. They've obviously had some of those products in terms of all the Infosphere stuff and the Cognos stuff. You know, we've had that for a number of years now, but what we've found is that because of the acquisition spree they've been on for the best part of a decade, they're now starting to pull all this together into an integrated view. And so there were some really wonderful client case studies about exactly how you kind of take this legacy environment that's a complete mess and start to bring some order to it. So there were some wonderful examples of that. But just from a product perspective, if we just cut away to this picture now, and you can see that they've actually put together an information platform, if you like, and you can see here some of those product families within this platform. You know, from very recent acquisitions at the top of that platform, Unica, which deals with a lot of that marketing, customer communications, integrated marketing management space, all the way down through their FileNet content management, Cognos for BI, Netezza for big data warehouse appliances, and then into the more traditional data warehousing stuff with their Infosphere product suite, and then obviously DB2 databases and things like that. So what we saw this year was a very integrated picture of this platform, which I thought was really wonderful. I got a lot of value out of it.
And do they, at the risk of repeating the question, but it's not really, do they enable the CIO to be able to just perhaps, you know, do a stripe of data or a slice of data or a proof of concept, or just break a piece off and kind of get it into the future state sort of looking architecture, which then helps with the sort of transitional approach? Yeah,
absolutely. And this is one of the questions I put to Steve Mills. So Steve Mills, you know, one of the very top executives in IBM, probably responsible for about $70 billion of their sales every single year in terms of hardware, software platforms. And I posed to him this exact question, and the conversation, you know, got to the point where there was agreement that approaches to these things require a specific point of entry inside an organisation, you know, depending on what kind of layer within that platform. You can't just tackle it all. It does require a big change mentality within inside an organisation. You can bite things off, but you do need to be very targeted. And what Steve also imparted, because this is obviously a concern being in Australia and a long way from IBM US, was that IBM partners are actually incented to run proof of concepts. And for a lot of this activity around big data and information and analytics, their preference is actually to come in and do a proof of concept, not to come in and say, you know, all these new layers of technology are the answer to your problems. They actually want to prove to the bank, they want to prove to the mining company, they want to prove to the government department, they want to prove to the retailer that by applying some of these things, then some real optimization can be brought to the business in terms of whether it's at the financial level, the operational level, the customer level, the product level, all these different sorts of things. So that's definitely their approach.
And how do you define big data? I mean, you know, is it just the Twitter stream? And, you know, what's the value of that really? I mean, how do you convince or talk to CIOs about the value that they get out of the Twitter, and, you know, are people getting value out of that? Yeah. But it's much more than just Twitter, right?
Absolutely. It's, you know, big data, there's a lot of different definitions floating around at the moment, but you know, the two biggest things, you're really talking about volume and velocity. Yes. And it's that kind of second part, that velocity, which catches a lot of people off guard. You know, some of our insights in terms of you know, takeaways from that conference is that you know, companies might understand the quantification of how much data they have at rest, but really have no understanding or you know, just of the quantification or the consequence of data in motion that is affecting their business every single day. Yes. And so that's, you know, that's big data. You can't really start to address that until you get your, you know, data at rest under control. And as you pointed out before, data at rest is that traditional part of the business that every single organisation still struggles with. And so we've got a quantum leap to get through now, and it's really important. And now is the time to do it.
So did they talk about I mean, ultimately a discussion about data and big data gets to, you know, tiered storage, you know, the ability to break your costs down into data that you don't use or access very much. And are they developing intelligence around that? Did they talk about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, look, from the perspective of you know, data warehousing is still obviously very important, and the capability for organisations to manage a lot of data through the big data warehouse appliances now is phenomenal. We're talking terabytes of data processed in seconds and moved around the organisation in minutes and things like that. What is important is to consider whether or not this data in motion, this streaming data, should stream straight into the data warehouse, and the answer to that is probably not. You know, it should be streaming from wherever it's coming from into other enterprise applications that might be managed. For example, the social stuff might be managed by the chief marketing officer through their CRM system or something. So filter it through that, managed from a master data management perspective through that application before it actually comes back through the traditional you know, data warehousing approaches, which then can have business intelligence and analytics applied to it. So no, that's a very important point.
Yeah, and I guess traditionally the perimeter, you know, of enterprise data, you know, was inside that perimeter is where the data warehouse was. But you know, it's a case now. Either would you say that perimeter is, you know, getting bigger, or is it basically just breaking down, and now that there's so much corporate data that's outside of that perimeter?
I think the perimeter is still there,
yeah.
And I think the capability to manage that perimeter is better than it's ever been. The technology to process and manage analytical data or any kind of data inside the organisations has been there for many years. What we're seeing now is, as with other technology trends over the last 20 years, is that actually that the price performance for capability for the systems to do this has now come down so much that we should all be doing it. So the you know, the perimeter of the organisation isn't really a problem, because what you're doing is essentially you're still just filtering organisation through a governed and quality process into your existing systems, and then you're exposing that either to your own staff or to the external organisation. So we should probably wrap up.
But I'm sure that we'll be able to cover off, you know, in continuing episodes.
Yeah, maybe we should do another episode on this. Yeah. The final point I would say, you know, on the big data, it kind of struck me when I was over there, and this is very much representative of the size of the economies in North America and Europe as opposed to Australia, whether or not, you know, American economies and American companies are really being exposed to like supersized data, you know, that supersize me. So I don't really think there's, you know, big data isn't big data. Big data can be segmented for different geographic regions, for different industries and things like that. So big data is going to mean something different for everybody, and I think probably in Australia we might be, you know, in terms of small, medium, large, supersize me, I think, you know, we might be talking about, for the large part of the Australian market, you know, kind of medium data, yes, as opposed to big data.
Yeah, and I think that was a very valid point you mentioned earlier about velocity, you know, data in motion, and streaming, that whole notion of data sort of whizzing past and being able to leverage it, you know, when you can at that opportunity. So
yeah, look, our IOD is one of the best information and data-focused conferences on the planet each year. So I'd recommend anyone to get to it in 2012.
And the location's not too bad either.
Las Vegas, yeah, it's you know, it's a nice town.
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, as they say.
Or as one of the presenters said, what happens in Vegas stays on the cameras in Vegas. So you know, with that.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you very much.
Right.